Hey everyone, ready to have some fun while leveling up your English listening?
I am.
All right, let's dive into some seriously awesome tips and creative approaches
Mm,
from this video script, all about making English listening practice enjoyable and effective. You ready?
absolutely. What makes this approach so cool is that it's all about enjoyment.
Yeah. Who wants to feel like they're stuck in a boring classroom, right? It should be fun.
For sure. And, one of the best ways to make it fun is to incorporate it into things you already love, like movies and TV shows.
Okay, so like just watching our favorite shows in English. I mean, that sounds fun, but wouldn't it be a bit tough, especially if you're still learning?
That's where subtitles can be a real game changer. Start with subtitles in your native language, then slowly transition to English subtitles. It's like training wheels for your ears. You gradually get used to the sounds of English.
I like that. It's like dipping your toes in the water before jumping in, so you're not just thrown into the deep end.
Exactly. And before you know it, you might even find yourself watching without subtitles altogether.
Wow, that's the dream.
It is. But here's the thing. Don't just passively watch. Really engage with the audio. Pause, rewind, repeat lines, and try to mimic the actor's pronunciation.
So it's like taking your listening skills to the gym.
Exactly. You're actively working those ear muscles.
I'm already feeling more motivated.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got movies and TV covered. What about something a bit more on the go?
You're thinking about podcasts.
Exactly. They're perfect for those little pockets of free time throughout the day, right? Like on your commute or while you're working out.
Absolutely. And the variety is mind-blowing. You can find podcasts on literally any topic imaginable.
So there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
But as a beginner, where do you even start?
Well, there are some amazing podcasts specifically designed for English learners.
Oh, that's cool. Like what?
Well, like ESL Pod, where they break down grammar and vocabulary, the English we speak, which focuses on everyday expressions, and all ears English, which gives you tips on sounding more natural.
Those sound like great starting points.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking as you get more comfortable, you can branch out into podcasts about your interests, right? Like, I'm a big fan of true crime podcasts. Could I just dive into one of those?
Absolutely. In fact, exploring podcasts based on your interests is a fantastic way to stay engaged and make learning feel less like a chore.
And the best part,
A lot of podcasts provide transcripts, so you can read along as you listen.
that's a game changer. It's like having a built-in study guide. All right, so we've got movies, TV shows, podcasts. But what if you want something a bit more interactive, something that feels like a game?
Well, for that, we have listening games.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
They're a super fun way to train your ears. One cool idea is to try guess the sound quizzes.
Ooh, I love those. You listen to a sound and try to figure out what it is, right?
Exactly. It's not just about random sounds, though. It actually helps you become more aware of different tones, accents, and emotions in spoken English.
So it's like fine-tuning your ear for all those subtle nuances.
You got it. And speaking of music, that's another amazing tool for improving your English listening skills.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, who doesn't love music? But how can we use it specifically for language learning?
Well, it's all about picking English songs you genuinely enjoy and then really diving into the lyrics.
So like singing along at the top of our lungs.
Yes. Embrace your inner karaoke star. It's a fantastic way to practice pronunciation and intonation while having a blast.
Okay, so no more guilty pleasures, just guilt-free English practice.
Exactly. But remember, start with slower songs with clear pronunciation. And as your confidence grows, you can level up to faster songs and even rap music.
That's a good tip. Start slow and steady, then crank up the speed as you go. So we've got movies, TV shows, podcasts, listening games, music. What's next on our list of awesome listening resources?
Well, how about the king of online content, YouTube?
YouTube. It's like an endless universe of entertainment and information. But how can we use it specifically for improving our English listening?
Well, the key is to be selective and intentional. Don't just fall into the endless scroll.
Okay, so how do we avoid that?
The source recommends channels like BBC Learning English for structured lessons, TED Ed for those cool animated explanations, and even vloggers for a taste of real everyday English.
Oh, that's a good point. It's like getting a glimpse into how people actually speak and interact.
And the great thing about YouTube is that you can adjust the playback speed. If someone's speaking too fast, you can just slow it down.
That's a lifesaver. I can't tell you how many times I've been watching something and wish I could just hit the pause button on real life.
Right. And here's a bonus tip: engage with the comment section. It's a great way to practice your reading and writing skills while immersing yourself in the online English community.
That's a great idea. I never thought of it that way.
Oh.
Okay, so we've covered tons of amazing ways to practice listening with technology, but what about good old-fashioned human interaction?
You're so right. There's no substitute for real-life conversations.
But what if I don't have many opportunities to speak English in my daily life?
Well, there are some amazing language exchange apps like Tandem or HelloTalk that can connect you with native English speakers from all over the world.
Oh, wow, that's cool. It's like having a pen pal, but for spoken English.
Exactly. And even just a few minutes of conversation each day can make a huge difference.
I love that. It's like those micro workouts that are all the rage these days. Small, consistent efforts can lead to big results, right?
Exactly. And remember, don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the process. Just relax, have fun, and focus on connecting with the other person.
I'm already feeling more confident just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered movies, TV shows, podcasts, listening games, music, YouTube, and even language exchange apps. What else could possibly be on our list of amazing listening resources?
Well, how about audiobooks? They're like having a personal storyteller in your pocket.
Ooh, audiobooks. I love listening to those while I'm going for a walk or doing chores around the house. But are they really that helpful for improving English listening skills?
They can be, especially if you choose audiobooks that match your interests and your level.
That makes sense. So if you're a beginner, you might want to start with something simple and familiar, right?
Exactly. You could even revisit a book you've already read in your native language. Apps like Audible and LibriVox offer a massive library of audiobooks to explore.
So it's like experiencing your favorite stories in a new way.
And one of the great things about audiobooks is that you can control the pace. If you miss something, just rewind and listen again. You can even adjust the narration speed to match your comfort level.
It's like having a personal listening trainer in your pocket. But isn't it a bit passive? I mean, you're just listening, right?
Well, yes and no. While listening is the primary focus, it's far from a passive activity. As you listen, you're absorbing the natural rhythm and flow of the language, expanding your vocabulary and getting used to different accents and speaking styles.
I never thought about it that way. It's like a workout for your listening muscles without even realizing it.
Exactly. And many audiobooks come with transcripts, so you can always refer back to the written text if you need to.
It's like having a built-in safety net.
Yes.
Okay, so audiobooks are definitely on my list now. What other tech-savvy tools can we add to our listening arsenal?
Well, have you ever tried interactive language learning apps like Duolingo, LingQ, or LS Speak? They've taken language learning and made it fun and engaging.
Oh, I've definitely heard of Duolingo. It's like the king of gamified language learning. What about the others?
Well, they each have their own unique strengths. Duolingo is great for building a foundation with its bite-sized lessons and game-like rewards. LingQ focuses on reading and listening comprehension with its vast library of authentic content and interactive transcripts. And LS Speak uses AI-powered speech recognition to help you perfect your pronunciation.
It's like having a personal language coach in your pocket. And they're perfect for those times when you have a few minutes to spare, right? Like while you're waiting in line or commuting to work.
Absolutely. And they encourage consistency by setting daily goals and tracking your progress. It's like a mini workout for your English skills whenever you have a spare moment.
This is awesome. We've covered so much ground, and I'm already feeling so inspired to level up my English listening skills. But I have a feeling there's even more to explore, right?
You bet. We've talked about accents a bit, but it's important to emphasize just how crucial it is to adapt to different English accents.
Oh, I've totally been there. I remember trying to watch a British show and feeling completely lost because the accent was so different from what I was used to.
It's a common experience for English learners. English is spoken all over the world, and each region has its own unique flavor.
So how do we train our ears to understand all these different variations of English?
Well, the source suggests actively seeking out content from different English-speaking countries,
Like what?
like watching movies and TV shows from the UK, Australia, Canada, even India. Expose yourself to the beautiful diversity of spoken English.
It's like expanding your listening vocabulary to include all these different accents.
Exactly, and YouTube's a great resource for that. You can find channels that focus on specific accents or explore videos from different countries.
I'm going to need a bigger watch list. Okay, we've covered so many fun and engaging methods. What's our final tip for today?
Well, we've talked about listening to different accents, but there's
Accents.
one classic technique that's incredibly effective for improving listening comprehension: dictation.
Dictation, like what we did back in school.
Yep, that's the one. It might seem a bit old school, but it's a fantastic way to train your ears to catch individual words and phrases.
So how's it work?
It's simple, really. You listen to an audio clip, Pause it, write down what you hear, and then check your work against a transcript.
It's like a workout for your listening and writing skills combined. But wouldn't it be super frustrating, especially in the beginning?
It can be challenging, but the key is to start slow and gradually increase the difficulty.
That's good advice. Don't try to run a marathon before you can walk.
Exactly. And as you practice dictation, you'll start noticing subtle details you might have missed before, like word endings, intonation patterns, and even subtle differences in pronunciation.
Wow, this is incredible. We've covered 10 fantastic methods for boosting English listening skills. From binge watching our favorite shows to playing listening games, singing karaoke, exploring YouTube, and even practicing good old-fashioned dictation, there's something for everyone.
Absolutely. It's all about finding methods that spark your interest and fit into your lifestyle. Remember, language learning is a journey, not a race.
Well said. And it's a journey we can all enjoy. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to pause for a moment and reflect on something that really stood out to me. You know what's really cool about all these methods is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about finding what works best for you.
That's what's so great about this source. It's all about empowering the listener. It's like they're saying, hey, here are all these amazing tools. Now go out and experiment and see what clicks for you.
It's like a buffet of English listening goodness.
Exactly. But before you can even start experimenting, you need to figure out what you like, what you don't like, and what kind of learner you are.
So it's like a self-discovery journey before the language learning journey begins.
I like that. It's about getting to know yourself as a learner so you can choose the methods that resonate most with you.
Okay, so let's say our listener has taken some time for self-reflection and they've identified their learning style and preferences. What's next? How do they actually apply all this amazing advice to their life?
Well, I'd encourage the listener to think back to their past learning experiences. What methods have they enjoyed the most? What activities have helped them learn most effectively?
So it's like looking for patterns in your own learning history.
Exactly. And once you've identified those patterns, you can start exploring the methods we've discussed with a more discerning eye. For example, if you're a visual learner, you might gravitate towards methods that incorporate reading and watching, like using subtitles or following along with transcripts.
And if you're more of an auditory learner, you might find that podcasts and music are your jam.
Right. And don't forget about all those interactive games and apps. They can add a fun and engaging element to your practice.
This is all so insightful. But how will the listener know if all this effort is actually paying off? What are some signs that their listening skills are improving?
Well, one of the most noticeable signs is an increase in comprehension. You'll find yourself understanding more of what you hear, even in challenging situations like fast-paced conversations or movies with accents.
Those aha moments when you suddenly realize you're catching all the nuances of the language.
Exactly. And as your comprehension grows, you'll also see a significant expansion in your vocabulary. You'll be picking up new words and phrases effortlessly just through listening.
It's like your brain is becoming this amazing language sponge.
I love that image. And as your vocabulary grows, so too will your confidence.
It's a beautiful cycle, isn't it? Improved listening leads to a richer vocabulary, which in turn boosts your confidence and makes you even more eager to keep learning.
Exactly. And as you continue on this journey, remember to celebrate those small victories, those moments when you understand something you didn't before. It's all about progress, not perfection.
That's such a great reminder. Sometimes we get so caught up in the end goal that we forget to appreciate the journey itself. But as we're talking about this, it reminds me of something that our source material didn't explicitly address, but I think it's a crucial aspect of language learning that our listener will appreciate.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What did you have in mind?
Well, we talked about active listening, really focusing on understanding every word and grammatical structure. But I think there's also a place for passive listening in our English learning routine.
That's a fantastic point. I think a lot of people underestimate the power of passive listening.
I know, right? It's almost like we feel guilty if we're not actively studying every minute of the day. But sometimes just letting our brains soak up the sounds of the language without any pressure or expectation can be incredibly beneficial.
Absolutely. It's like taking a relaxing bath for your brain.
I love that. So how can our listener incorporate passive listening into their daily life?
It's super easy. Just put on some English music podcasts or audiobooks in the background while you're doing other things like cooking, cleaning, or even exercising.
So it's like a low-effort way to keep your ears tuned to the language, even when you're not actively studying.
Exactly. And you might be surprised at how much you absorb just by doing this regularly.
It's like osmosis for your ears. So we've got active listening for focused practice and passive listening for those moments when we want to relax and let our brains do the work. It's about finding that perfect balance, right?
Exactly. And it's about remembering that language learning should be enjoyable. It's a journey, not a race.
Well said. And speaking of journeys, there's another path I think we should explore, a path that leads to an even deeper understanding of English listening. We've talked about so many amazing techniques for improving English listening, from active listening to passive listening, from focusing on accents to embracing different speeds of speech. But there's one more layer I want to explore, something that our source material didn't explicitly address, but it's been a game changer for me personally.
Okay, I'm all ears. What is it?
It's the idea that listening isn't just about understanding the words themselves. It's about understanding the context, the intentions, the unspoken messages behind the words.
Ah, you're talking about reading between the lines, but with your ears.
Exactly. It's like listening with your whole being, not just your ears.
I love that. And it's a skill that develops over time as you become more attuned to the subtle nuances of communication.
So how can our listener start to develop this deeper level of listening comprehension? What are some practical tips?
One of the keys is to pay attention to nonverbal cues, like tone of voice, facial expressions, body language. These cues can often reveal more than words alone.
It's like they're adding another layer of meaning to the conversation.
Exactly. And as you become more aware of these nonverbal cues, you'll start to pick up on those subtle hints and undertones that give communication its richness and depth.
It's like becoming a communication detective.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about nonverbal cues, right? There's also the cultural context to consider.
Oh, absolutely. The same words or phrases can have completely different meanings depending on the culture.
Oh, I've definitely learned that the hard way. It's so important to be aware of those cultural nuances.
It is. And as you immerse yourself in different cultures, you'll start to develop a more sophisticated understanding of how language is used to express ideas, emotions, and social dynamics.
So it's about expanding our cultural horizons as well as our linguistic skills.
Precisely. It's all connected. And as you delve deeper into the world of language and culture, you'll start to see that language is so much more than just words. It's a reflection of who we are, how we think, and how we interact with the world around us.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. We've explored so many amazing techniques and uncovered some truly insightful gems about the art of English listening.
It's been a joy to share these insights with you and our listeners.
And I think our listeners walking away with a treasure trove of valuable tools and strategies. But before we say goodbye, I want to leave our listener with one final thought.
What's that?
Remember that language is a living, breathing thing. It's constantly evolving and changing. So as you continue on your English learning journey, stay curious, stay open-minded, and embrace the beauty of this ever-changing language.
Beautifully said. And remember, the journey of language learning is a lifelong adventure. It's filled with challenges, triumphs, and moments of pure joy, so savor every step of the way.
That's a perfect note to end on. So to our listener out there, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep embracing the magic of language. All right, so today we are going to be looking at some fun ways to practice English listening.
Okay.
Maybe you have a big presentation coming up, or maybe you just want to catch up in your field, or maybe you are just like me and you just love learning.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at a script from a video about fun ways to practice.
Okay.
And it's really cool because it's not just like your typical textbook.
Right.
It's more interactive and engaging.
I like that.
Yeah.
And the video, it does start by acknowledging those classic ways to improve your listening. Like watching TV shows or movies.
Oh, yeah.
But it takes things a step further,
Okay.
by emphasizing the power of active listening.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's one thing to have a show on in the background.
Right.
But, if you're really trying to improve your listening skills, it's important to be more active.
Mm-hmm.
And the source talks about this a lot, like pausing the show
Yeah.
or repeating lines or even mimicking the pronunciation.
It's about really absorbing what you're hearing,
Yeah.
making those neural connections, turning passive listening into a workout for your brain.
Oh, I like that.
And speaking of workouts, the source also highlights podcasts as another fantastic tool.
Yeah, podcasts are great.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many podcasts out there specifically designed for English learners.
Mm-hmm.
But what I thought was really interesting was the suggestion to explore podcasts on topics that you're already passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, think about it.
Like you could learn about astrophysics
Right.
and improve your English at the same time.
Exactly. And when you're genuinely interested in the subject matter, you're naturally more engaged.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You're more motivated to understand what's being said, and plus it exposes you to a wider range of vocabulary and speaking styles.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that I thought was interesting that the source mentions
Mm-hmm.
is these guess the sound games.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever played those? I've always loved those,
Yeah.
but I never thought of them as like an English learning tool.
Yeah.
What is it about those games that actually can help us fine-tune our ears?
Well, when you're trying to identify sounds without any visual cues,
Mm-hmm.
you're forced to pay closer attention to the details, like the intonation,
Okay.
the rhythm, the subtle differences in vowel sounds.
Yeah.
And this heightened awareness can then transfer to understanding spoken language,
Okay.
particularly when it comes to distinguishing between different accents.
So it's like a workout for your ears,
Exactly.
getting them ready to decode different ways of speaking.
Precisely.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So the source also talks about music.
Okay.
And I know a lot of people, they just listen to music passively, while they're working or studying or whatever.
Right.
Are there ways to make music more of an active learning experience?
Absolutely. I mean, think about looking up the lyrics as you listen
Okay.
and singing along.
Mm-hmm.
It forces you to focus on pronunciation and rhythm, and you might even pick up some new vocabulary along the way.
Oh, for sure.
Karaoke apps can also be a fun way to practice pronunciation and fluency
Yeah.
in a more relaxed and engaging setting.
I love karaoke.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing that the source brought up that kind of surprised me was using YouTube to improve listening skills.
Okay.
And I know there are a lot of dedicated language learning channels on YouTube, but are there other types of videos that can be helpful?
Oh, definitely. I mean, think about vloggers, for example.
Okay.
Vlogs offer a window into everyday conversations with all their natural pauses, slang, and colloquialisms.
Right.
It's a fantastic way to get a feel for the rhythm of spoken English outside of a formal learning environment.
So it's like eavesdropping on real conversations
Exactly.
and picking up on the nuances of how people actually speak.
Mhm.
And the source even suggests like interacting with the content, like leaving comments and answering questions to practice writing and comprehension.
Engaging with the content in this way turns passive viewing into an active learning experience.
Right.
It's about connecting with the language in a more authentic and meaningful way. But of course, nothing beats real-life conversations.
Yeah, I know a lot of learners can feel intimidated by that,
Sure.
but the source really emphasizes that it's about progress, not perfection.
Of course.
And even short daily conversations can have a big impact.
Absolutely. And there are so many resources available to help you connect with native speakers, like language exchange apps.
Oh, yeah.
You can find partners who share your interests and practice conversing about topics you're passionate about.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So you can find someone who shares your love of, I don't know,
Right.
vintage video games or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so speaking of things that can transport us, the source also highlights audiobooks as a great way to immerse yourself in the language.
Oh, yeah. Audiobooks are fantastic.
Yeah.
And what I found really intriguing was the idea of starting with books you're already familiar with.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so you can focus on the language without getting bogged down by the plot.
Okay.
And it can be a comforting way to ease into listening to longer stretches of English.
So it's like revisiting an old friend,
Right.
but with a new focus on the intricacies of the language.
Exactly. And for those who prefer shorter bursts of listening, there are always short stories.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And think about the vocabulary boost you get from listening to audiobooks.
Okay.
You encounter words you might not typically see in everyday conversation, and the context helps you understand their meanings and usage.
So it's like a stealth vocabulary upgrade.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, for those who love a bit of tech in their language learning, the source dives into the world of interactive apps.
Okay.
There are so many options out there, but are there any features or benefits that stand out to you?
Well, apps like Duolingo and LingQ offer a variety of listening exercises complete with transcripts, so you can follow along and check your understanding.
Okay.
Plus, they often have features like personalized feedback and progress tracking, which can be really motivating.
So it's like having a pocket-sized language coach.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
And speaking of expanding your horizons, the source makes a great point about getting accustomed to different English accents.
Yeah. That's so important.
In today's globalized world, it's more important than ever to be able to understand a variety of speakers.
Absolutely. Think about exploring content from various English-speaking countries,
Hmm.
like podcasts from Australia or news broadcasts from the UK.
Okay.
It's not just about understanding different accents, it's about appreciating the richness and diversity of the English language.
So it's like taking your ears on a world tour.
Exactly.
Now, the last technique on our list might seem a bit old school, but the source makes a compelling case for the power of dictation.
Oh, yeah, dictation.
I have to admit, I haven't done dictation since grade school.
Really?
Why is it still a valuable technique?
It may seem simple, but dictation forces you to pay incredibly close attention to every word and sound.
Okay.
You're actively listening, processing, and then transcribing what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic way to sharpen your focus and fine-tune your ear for the nuances of spoken English.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So it's like a mental workout
exactly.
that strengthens those listening muscles.
Precisely.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground already, from movies and podcasts to interactive apps and even dictation.
Yeah.
It feels like we've really uncovered a treasure trove of techniques.
And the best part is that there's something for everyone.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Regardless of your learning style or your personal interests, whether you thrive on structured lessons or prefer a more laid-back approach,
Hmm.
there's a method out there that can make learning to listen in English feel less like a chore
Right.
and more like a fun challenge.
Yeah. And what really stands out to me is that it doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing approach.
Right.
You could combine different techniques.
That's the look.
Maybe starting your day with a quick language learning app session, then switching to a podcast during your commute,
Mhm.
and then winding down with an audiobook in the evening.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about finding what works for you and weaving these techniques into your life in a way that feels natural and sustainable.
Yeah.
I think a lot of learners get caught up in finding the perfect method.
Right.
But the truth is, the most effective approach is the one that you'll actually stick with.
It's like creating a personalized playlist for your ears,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
Mixing and matching different sounds and styles to keep things interesting and engaging.
I like that.
You know, thinking back to all the methods we've discussed, it strikes me that there's a real emphasis on moving beyond passive listening and actively engaging with the language.
That's a key insight, whether it's pausing a podcast to repeat a phrase, singing along to a song, or taking notes during a YouTube video.
Right.
That active engagement helps to solidify the learning process.
So it's like taking ownership of your learning,
Exactly.
making it a more interactive and memorable experience.
And I think that ties in nicely with the idea of finding methods that align with your personal interests.
Yeah.
If you're truly fascinated by the subject matter, you're naturally going to be more attentive and motivated to understand what's being said.
Absolutely. It's about making that connection
Yeah.
between the language and your passions,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's history, science, music, or anything else that sparks your curiosity.
Exactly.
So it's not just about learning English.
Right.
It's about using English as a tool to explore the things you love,
I like that.
which makes the whole process feel less like work and more like an adventure.
Definitely.
But with so many options to choose from, how do you know where to start?
That's where a little self-reflection comes in. Think about your learning style, your interests, and your goals.
Okay.
Are you someone who enjoys structured lessons, or do you prefer a more immersive approach? Do you thrive on interactive activities, or do you learn best through repetition and memorization?
Yeah.
Once you have a better understanding of how you learn best,
Okay.
you can start to narrow down the options and choose methods that resonate with you.
So it's like creating a roadmap for your listening journey,
Exactly.
charting a course that aligns with your strengths and preferences. But even with a plan in place, there are bound to be challenges along the way, right?
Of course, learning a language takes time and effort,
Yeah.
and there will be moments when you feel frustrated or stuck.
Right.
But remember that everyone learns at their own pace,
Hmm.
and there's no shame in taking your time and revisiting concepts until they click.
It's like learning any new skill, whether it's playing an instrument or mastering a sport.
Exactly.
There will be ups and downs, but the key is to keep practicing and not give up on yourself. And it's important to celebrate those small victories along the way, right?
Absolutely. Each step forward, no matter how small, is a testament to your dedication and hard work.
Mhm.
Whether it's understanding a new word, following along with a conversation, or feeling more confident in your ability to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
take the time to acknowledge those achievements.
Right.
It can be incredibly motivating to look back and see how far you've come.
It's about recognizing that progress isn't always linear.
Right.
There will be plateaus and setbacks, but those moments are all part of the learning process.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important message to emphasize,
Yeah,
especially for learners who might be feeling overwhelmed or discouraged.
for sure.
It's about shifting the focus from perfection to progress.
Okay.
Embrace those mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
Mhm.
And remember that fluency is a journey, not a destination.
It's about enjoying the ride and finding joy in the process of discovery.
Absolutely.
Now, we've talked a lot about different techniques and strategies,
We have.
but at the end of the day, what's the most important ingredient for success?
I would say it's that inner drive, that passion for learning and connecting with the world around you. When you're genuinely motivated to improve your listening skills, you'll find ways to make it happen.
Mhm.
Whether it's setting aside dedicated time for practice, seeking out opportunities to converse with native speakers,
Right.
or simply making a conscious effort to pay attention to the sounds of the language in your everyday life.
So it's about cultivating that love of learning,
Yeah.
that insatiable curiosity that drives us to explore and expand our horizons. Because when you're truly passionate about something,
Mm-hmm.
you're more likely to persevere through challenges and setbacks, right?
Absolutely. That passion fuels the fire,
Yeah.
keeping you engaged and motivated even when the going gets tough.
Right.
And when you combine that passion with effective strategies and a willingness to experiment,
Okay.
you set yourself up for success.
It's like having a compass and a map for your learning journey.
Exactly.
You know where you want to go and you have the tools to get there.
And while the journey may have its twists and turns, the destination is well worth the effort.
Oh, for sure.
Imagine being able to effortlessly understand conversations, movies, podcasts, and music in English.
Yeah.
It opens up a whole new world of possibilities,
Right.
connecting you to people, cultures, and ideas in a deeper and more meaningful way.
It's about unlocking the power of language to bridge those gaps and create meaningful connections. And that's what makes this whole process so exciting and rewarding.
It's about embracing the journey and all the challenges and triumphs that come with it.
Yeah.
And remember, you're not alone on this path.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole community of learners out there who are facing similar obstacles and celebrating similar victories. Connect with those individuals, share your experiences, and support each other along the way.
It's about building a network of support and encouragement to help you stay motivated and inspired. After all, learning a language is a social endeavor,
It is.
and connecting with others can make the journey much more enjoyable and fulfilling.
It's about creating a shared experience, learning from each other's mistakes, and celebrating each other's successes. And who knows, you might even make some lifelong friends along the way now as we wrap up this discussion. I want to leave our listeners with a few final thoughts to ponder.
I love that idea of community support. You know, it's like having a team of cheerleaders on your side rooting for you every step of the way.
Yeah.
So with all these fantastic techniques that we've talked about,
Yeah.
what's one final thought that you would leave our listener with?
You know, think back to all the methods that we discussed today. Which ones sparked your curiosity? Which ones seem like they'd fit seamlessly into your life? Start there.
Yeah.
It's not about mastering every technique.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you and building from there.
That's such a powerful message.
Mhm.
You know, we often think of listening as a passive skill, but what we've really explored today is how to make it an active and engaging part of our lives.
Exactly. And when you approach listening with that mindset, it becomes less about simply understanding words and more about connecting with ideas, stories, and experiences.
It's about opening ourselves up to a world of new possibilities, both in terms of language learning and personal growth.
I couldn't agree more so to our listener. Embrace the challenge, find joy in the process, and never stop exploring the fascinating world of English listening. You might be surprised at what you discover about the language and about yourself along the way.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the expert sharing your own tips and insights with other eager learners. Until then, happy listening. Welcome to our deep dive on fun ways to practice English. Listening. I've been looking over these sources you sent, and I'm already excited to talk about some of these methods.
Yeah, it's amazing how many of these are things you probably already enjoy, you know? It's just about like reframing them so they work double duty.
Exactly. So let's just jump right in. I think a lot of us already watch movies and TV shows, and your source mentions Friends, The Office, and Stranger Things because the language is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, they use a lot of like everyday vocabulary and phrases, but the real magic is that immersion, you know?
Mm-hmm.
By watching, you're training your ear to the natural rhythms and pronunciation without even thinking about it.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like absorbing it passively. And the source also says to start with subtitles in your native language, then move to English subtitles, then eventually take the training wheels off.
Yeah, it's like a, step-by-step approach, gradually increasing the challenge as your ear gets more and more used to the sounds of English. But even with subtitles, it's important to do active listening. It's not just like background noise. Like you should pause and repeat lines, try to mimic the pronunciation. It's almost like you're shadowing a native speaker.
Makes your living room into an acting studio.
Right.
Now let's switch gears to podcasts. They're everywhere these days. Your source mentioned some that are specifically designed for English learners, like ESL Pod and The English We Speak. I'm not that familiar with those. Could you explain what those are like?
Sure. So ESL Pod is great, especially for beginners. They have like structured lessons and clear explanations of like grammar and vocabulary. And The English We Speak focuses on idioms and everyday expressions, which can be tricky.
And what's cool about podcasts like these is they often have transcripts so you can follow along with the audio.
Exactly.
I'm guessing, though, there's more to podcast learning than just those two shows, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You should explore general interest podcasts, too. True crime, comedy, history, anything you're already into. Find something you're actually passionate about, and English practice becomes less like practice.
Okay, so maybe instead of listening to my usual true crime podcast in Spanish, I could switch to one in English.
Yeah, exactly. And think about how convenient podcasts are. You can listen during your commute while you're cooking at the gym.
All those little moments can become learning opportunities. Okay, now I have to say the part in the source about games caught my eye. Can you tell me more about that?
Oh, sure. There's Guess the Sound, where you listen to sound effects and try to identify what's making the noise. You can find quizzes on YouTube, or there are apps. It's harder than you think, but it really sharpens your listening.
That does sound challenging. What other games does the source talk about?
There's also like a spot the difference game, but with audio descriptions. So you listen to two slightly different descriptions of a picture and try to figure out what's changed. It trains you to listen for like subtle details, not just the basic words.
So instead of focusing on what's being said, you're focusing on how it's being said. That's a great way to fine-tune your ear. Anything else about games that stood out to you?
Yeah, it seems like games could be a really fun way to challenge yourself. Now, speaking of challenges, what about music? The source says singing along can be a great way to practice. But isn't it hard to catch all the words when someone's singing?
It can be, yeah. Especially with like Sasser songs.
Yeah.
But music is so powerful for language learning. The rhythm and the melody can actually help with memorization. And singing along improves pronunciation and fluency.
So it's like your brain is latching onto the words more easily because of the music.
Yeah. And think about how much we listen to music passively. By making an effort to sing along, you're making it an active learning experience. The source even recommends karaoke apps like Smol.
That makes karaoke sound way more productive.
Okay.
But realistically, what are some tips for using music to practice English? Well, you could start with slower songs where you can really focus on the lyrics. Think of someone like Adele. The vocals are really clear and the tempo isn't too fast. And as you get more confident, you can challenge yourself with faster songs, maybe even rap.
That's quite the range. So we've covered movies, TV shows, podcasts, games, music. It feels like we've talked about everything. Is there anything else in the source that we haven't touched on yet?
Oh, there's still plenty. The source also mentions using YouTube, which most of us use every day.
YouTube? I usually think of YouTube for entertainment, not for learning English.
How does the source suggest using it?
Well, there's a ton of educational content on YouTube specifically
so.
for English learners like BBC Learning English and TED Ed. But what's really interesting is that the source encourages going beyond those and exploring channels that match your interests, even if they're not specifically for learning English.
So if I love cooking, I could watch cooking channels in English. Exactly. The key is to find something you're genuinely interested in because that will keep you coming back for more. And don't forget, you can adjust the playback speed on YouTube. Slowing things down can be a huge help, especially when you're first starting out.
That way you don't get overwhelmed by people talking too fast, and then as you improve, you can speed it up. Okay, so YouTube is a yes. What else is in the source's toolbox?
It mentions audiobooks. Imagine getting lost in a story while also immersing yourself in English.
That does sound relaxing. But isn't there a risk of just zoning out and not really paying attention to the language?
There's always a risk of that with passive listening. But audiobooks expose you to natural intonation, pacing, and vocabulary in a way that reading just can't. And there's something about hearing a story read aloud that brings the language to life.
I can see that. And with apps like Audible and LibriVox, there are so many audiobooks to choose from. What are some tips for choosing a good audiobook for English practice?
The source says to start with a book you're already familiar with. maybe something you've read in your native language. That way you can focus more on the language and less on the plot.
Familiarity makes it easier to pick up the nuances. So we've talked about passive entertainment games, music, YouTube audiobooks, but eventually you have to actually speak the language. What does the source say about practicing listening in real conversations?
You're right. Real-world practice is key. The source recommends checking out language exchange apps like Tandem or Hello Talk. Those connect you with native English speakers who are learning your language.
I've heard of those, but I've always been a little intimidated to use them. Is it awkward to just jump into a conversation with a stranger?
It can feel a bit daunting at first, but the source recommends starting small. Just begin with short, simple conversations to build your confidence. Remember, the goal is progress, not perfection.
Progress over perfection. I like that. So instead of worrying about making mistakes, I should just focus on getting comfortable with the back and forth of a conversation. Any other advice about using those apps?
The source emphasizes that mistakes are inevitable. You shouldn't be afraid of them. In fact, mistakes are opportunities to learn. And the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with the natural flow of conversation.
That's encouraging. So we've covered a lot. Passive entertainment, interactive games, real-world conversations. It's amazing how many different approaches there are to practicing English listening.
Mm.
Is there anything else in the source that stood out to you?
Mm. There's one more technique that I found quite interesting, even though it might seem a bit old-fashioned: dictation.
Dictation. Like what we used to do in school where the teacher would read something and we'd have to write it down.
Mm.
Is that a bit outdated?
Maybe, but dictation is actually very effective. It forces you to pay attention to individual words and sounds, which helps train your ear and improve your short-term memory.
I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
How does the source suggest using dictation for English practice?
It's simple. You listen to a short audio clip, pause, write down what you hear, and then check your work against a transcript. You can start with simple sentences and gradually work your way up.
It's like a workout for your ears.
Exactly. And just like with any workout, you can adjust the difficulty level to match your abilities.
So we've got movies and shows, podcasts, music, YouTube, even dictation. It's amazing how many different techniques there are for practicing English listening. It seems like the key is to find what works for you and to mix things up to keep it interesting.
Absolutely. And one thing the source really emphasizes is listening to different English accents. After all, English isn't spoken the same way everywhere.
That's true. There's British English, American English, Australian English. It goes on and on. But why is it important to listen to different accents? I mean, if I'm mostly going to be talking with Americans, shouldn't I just focus on American English?
Yeah, it's good to prioritize the accent you'll use most often. But exposure to other accents can really help you develop a well-rounded understanding of spoken English. You'll hear different pronunciations, rhythms, even vocabulary. The more you listen to different accents, the more prepared you'll be to understand anyone who speaks English.
So instead of just watching American sitcoms, I could try a British drama or an Australian documentary.
Exactly. And YouTube is a great resource for that. You can find content from all over the world. The source even suggests watching interviews with people from different countries just to hear how they speak.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools for practicing English listening. What are some of the most important things you think our listeners should take away from all of this?
I think the most important thing is consistency. It's not about cramming in hours of practice. It's about making English listening a part of your daily routine in a way that you can actually stick with.
It shouldn't feel like a chore.
Right. And don't forget about variety. We've talked about so many techniques today, Experiment, find what works best for you, and don't be afraid to mix things up.
The bottom line is to have fun. Learning a language should be enjoyable.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. Given all these techniques for practicing English listening, what unique aspect of your personality or your interests could you use to make this journey even more fun and more effective for you?
I love that question. It reminds us that learning is personal. We all have our own passions and strengths that we can bring to this.
So as you continue learning English, remember to adapt these methods to fit your own needs and preferences. Embrace your creativity and your curiosity. And most importantly, enjoy the process.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And to our listener, happy listening.